Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeff Kanige. I'm the chief editor of NJBIZ. Welcome to our discussion on manufacturing. I think many of you have probably encountered some misconceptions about manufacturing among your fellow New Jerseyans. A lot of people don't think manufacturing happens here anymore. They think the factories long ago went south, literally and figuratively. In fact, the plants and assembly lines are still here, and as they have been since Alexander Hamilton essentially founded the American manufacturing industry in Paterson 225 years ago. Now, the plants look different these days, and one of the industry's main challenges is how to convince young, smart, talented young people that they can have rewarding careers in manufacturing. And the industry faces some more prosaic challenges too, like taxes, regulation, and security. We're going to try and talk about all of those issues this morning, and leading our discussion will be John Kennedy, the Chief Executive Officer of the New Jersey Manufacturing Extension Program. Before joining the NJMEP, Mr. Kennedy was Senior Vice President and President of the U.S. market for Cofelli Services, a provider of equipment and services to airports around the world. Before that, he was the owner of Multitech Group, a business engineering, design, and services firm for government facilities, power plants, and airports. He also has more than a decade of experience in the material handling industry in roles at Sandvik Process Systems and the Coleman Equipment Company. Please welcome John Kennedy.
Good morning. Yep, I've spent my whole life in engineering and manufacturing. I owned a manufacturing company as well as an engineering company, both in New Jersey. I was lucky enough to sell both for a profit, and because I was always confused by why all my employees wanted to get paid every 2 weeks. I just didn't understand. But believe me, after 25 years of paying payroll, that first 2-week period afterwards was really nice for my wife and I. I agree. There's a lot of misconceptions, not just in New Jersey, but across the country when you talk about manufacturing, because in our minds, we've heard it for 30-odd years that it's dead. Problem is, there's 11,130 companies in New Jersey alone that disagree with you. They employ close to 400,000 people. If you add pharma, which we do because they're actually manufacturing, and the supply chain, that's about $100 billion a year for New Jersey. That sounds like real money. If you go to the National Association of Manufacturing and you look at the wage, the average wage for an employee in New Jersey, and John, don't get scared now, all right? It's average wage, not. It's $90,000 a year. Now, it includes overtime, but I don't know, that sounds like a real good wage. So there's a lot of things that are missing. One of the things that gets missing is the fact that they're businesses and that it's not just a person in front of a machine making something, because in a lot of cases, that's not it. It's usually somebody behind a screen and a computer. And that's why the panelists today are very important to us, because they are the professional support to the industry. Now, NJMEP, what is that all about? Well, it's part of a manufacturing extension partnership. There's 51 of us in the country. We're not government agencies. We don't get government money. We can earn some government money through grants and so on, but we pass them along. Our role is four pieces. We assess companies to find out how we can help them. We consult, we train, and sometimes, which has become the least favorite of my job, we advocate. I'm an engineer by degree and by mentality, so speaking to politicians is not my favorite thing. I'm not saying they're good or bad, I'm just saying our brains don't match. My wife yells at me that I don't see enough gray. I say they don't see enough black and white. So it's just interesting. But I know 2 out of the 3 panelists very well, and what I'd like to ask each of them to do is to take 2 minutes, introduce yourself and your company, and just a brief of how manufacturing fits into your realm. Eric, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. My name's Eric Probst. I'm a lawyer at Porzio, Bromberg, and Newman. We're headquartered in Morristown, New Jersey. I have offices in New York City, Princeton, D.C., and up in Massachusetts, Westborough, Massachusetts. I've been representing manufacturers since the late 1990s, both at my old firm and at this firm, in a variety of capacities. One is a litigation lawyer, defending them when they get sued by someone who's been injured by one of their products, or if there's a breach of contract dispute about a product or a good that they've supplied. And then the other side is serving as what I would call as an outside general counsel, as their main lawyer, their sole lawyer, but from my seat in my law firm. And in doing so, I can provide the legal expertise and experience that I have, but also the legal expertise and experience that other lawyers in my firm have, whether it's IP, land use, development of property, buying property, estate planning for the CEO and the CFO, the C-suite personnel, and other services and disciplines that my firm provides, both out of the Morristown office, the New York office, and the Princeton office as well. Thanks, John.
Big Rob?
All right, great. My name's Rob Hassold. I'm CEO and founder of Cimquest. I've been in New Jersey my whole life. I escaped for 4 years to go out to Pennsylvania for school, out to Lehigh University. Mechanical engineering by background, and been involved in what's called the CAD/CAM industry for my whole career. CAD/CAM is computer-aided design and manufacturing. And 29 years ago, I founded Cimquest in my basement in Bridgewater, and I've hopefully steadily grown the company over those past 29 years. And essentially what we do is we're a value-added reseller of technology, and our focus is to implement that technology into companies, both engineering companies and to a larger extent, manufacturing companies. The technology that we implement is 3D printing, which everybody, I assume, has heard from at this point in time. But we were involved with 3D printing 22 years ago, before most people even knew it existed. So we've been involved with it for a long period of time. We did a major pivot in our business 2 years ago, where I changed 3D printing providers. And why that's significant, it was 51% of my business. So I kind of pulled the rug out from underneath the company 2 years ago. I have a habit of doing that to the chagrin of my employees. But the other side of the business that we're involved with is the more also on the manufacturing side with a product called Mastercam, which is a CAD/CAM product that is the most widely used software for programming CNC machines, like milling machines and lathes and wire EDMs. And we're the largest provider of that technology in the world. And then the last third leg of the stool is on the inspection, qualification, reverse engineering side of the equation. So, really, we have about several thousand manufacturing customers. Probably the largest extent of that customer base is in the tri-state region, but we span all the way from Maine down to Virginia on the software side, and we recently expanded into the Southeast, going all the way down to Florida on the 3D printing side. So that's it.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Rob Grote. I lead the manufacturing and distribution practice at Grassi and Company. I've been with the firm for 26 years now. Over that time, we've grown from a small 20-person operation to a firm of over 300 people with offices in New Jersey and New York. The companies that we work with will range varied sizes from $10 million for some of the early stage businesses that we work with up to well over $1 billion. Many of the companies that we work with are first-generation businesses. It's certainly interesting to work with the founders of the company. And with that, we've been able to really drive and help them with the success of their businesses. We provide all the traditional tax and accounting and audit services that a CPA firm would provide, but we enjoy the most, and there's been the biggest demand for what I would call the services that the clients really want. It's the things they need help with in their operations, their businesses, making things stronger. Nobody wants to have an audit done. Nobody wants to have us defend them in front of the IRS. It's something that they have to do. We like to help clients with the things that they want done. And so we try to, through our interactions and process with our clients, we work to identify those things that need to be addressed. We develop a to-do list, and we'll prioritize it with them and then work on these things as we go and deal with the compliance work, but also make sure that we're helping them make their businesses better and stronger.
Okay, if you're an entrepreneur and you start your business, a lot of times you hire the CPA who does your personal taxes, the lawyer who did your will, and the insurance company that does, or the insurance agent that does your car insurance. They're all good people. The problem is they're not business people. And what happens, and believe me, I learned it the hard way after a fire in one of my buildings, and what it cost me, that you need to go to people that you can trust and rely on. Does it cost you some additional money and some development of a relationship? Of course. But that's why these type of guys are here. Eric, let me start with you, because we hear it a lot from our client base about a lot of the employment laws that are coming out now, that they're employee friendly and everybody wants to be positive to their employees, but it's affecting business and a lot of small to mid-sized companies. The average manufacturer in New Jersey is 34 people. How are you seeing that hit us, and what are you hearing, and how are you solving some of it?
Sure. I mean, as a lawyer, I get, and you probably get, emails every day about programs. We call them continuing legal education, CLEs, and I get one a day since last year, about the new employment laws and legislation in New Jersey. And there are a lot of benefits to them, certainly, for the employee. If you go back over 100 years, employees had no rights, right? And they were, and you had kids working in the factories. But now, over the last year plus, you have laws that have come out in the state of New Jersey. Equal pay, equal work, equal pay. Now you have minimum wage. There's this, the push for recreational cannabis. There's medical, marijuana as well, and medical leave, which now has been adjusted based on a new law to apply to companies that employ 30 employees or more. It used to be 50. The biggest thing that I've seen, and what our employment lawyers counsel, is that you have to know the law first and foremost as the business leader, the business owner. You don't want to have to react to it 2 years from now when an employee sues claiming that she wasn't paid equally to another employee, or he wasn't paid equal to another employee because of one of the protected characteristics of that employee, or you're not adjusting your payroll to meet the minimum wage increases that will follow over the next several years up until 2024. And there are professionals out there with payroll. It should be quite simple. Your ADPs of the world, they can assist you to make that transition as the minimum wage increases a lot more simple, so you can focus on what you're meant to do. It's making money, and we're all here, to make money. But there are these pressures that 5-10 years ago you didn't really have to worry about. The issue, I think, the biggest part of it is that they're all coming together at the same time, right? You've got, I wrote them down. So there's equal pay, then there's minimum wage, and then you get the family leave, and there are a bunch of court decisions on those issues. And it's a lot to manage. So you need to have and if you can't manage it inside, there are third-party resources that you can use, some of these HR resources, to explain it, or find a lawyer or some business consultant that can explain those laws to you and how they impact your company. Go to, I was at Manufacturers Day last year. There's a great presentation on some of these new employment laws. You need to know to be aware of what's coming so you can prevent issues down the road. Because in New Jersey, with these lawsuits, they can bring attorney's fees. So if you lose, you've got to pay the attorney's fees of the other side. So be ready and be prepared by understanding, what these laws are and how they impact, if they impact your business at all.
Okay, I got a follow-up, but I'll save it for a little while later because it might tie into a couple other things. Robert, because I know him longer than you, and I call him Rob. So I went to Catholic school, and out of 15 boys, there was 12 of us named John. So you learn not to raise your head and look at the nun. So just saying. So talking about some of the law changes that we're changing towards employment law, what about some of the tax areas that are really, again, this is another area where we get calls all the time. That's some of the reasons why we do our workshops, because they overload. So what are you seeing, and how does it apply?
Yeah, so one of the big changes with the tax laws that came out last year, the depreciation benefits were increased. So we went to what they call 100% bonus depreciation, or basically expensing when a company buys or invests in a certain type of equipment. They also increased the what they call the Section 179 deduction to $1 million. That was previously $500, and when I started my career, it was $25,000. So the incentives for companies to make investment in equipment are very high right now. And we've had bonus depreciation in the past. It's been up, it's been down, it's been 100% in the past. These are temporary opportunities. We're going to have another election soon, so we're not sure what the results of that will be. That's what drives a benefit like this. One of the things that we do each year is during the year, we'll talk with our clients about what their needs are at the facility, what types of equipment they should be investing in, what the wants are from the production team, and what they're looking to make changes or bring in a new process in-house, maybe something that they used to outsource. And we're seeing clients make those investments today. We recently had a company purchase a very expensive piece of equipment that performed 6 functions in the production process in one spot, in one piece of equipment. It's interesting because it looks really out of place in the facility. The facility itself is pretty traditional, much older equipment, batch production. This is a very high-tech looking piece of equipment. It pulls the raw materials from a tower based on what's going to be produced, pulls it in, laser cuts everything, and does a few other steps, and then pushes it out the other end. It's operated by 2 people. The benefit here is that it wasn't to reduce headcount in this case, but it was to increase production capacity. And because of the way the machine operates, they're actually able to do smaller runs of parts or pieces for customers. It gives them a lot more flexibility. They don't have to do these large batches and then figure out where to keep it until a customer wants to take delivery of it, which happens to be an issue for their business. It is interesting, though, and John, you mentioned it earlier, the operator is using a keyboard. And fortunately, they were able to bring in a couple of their existing employees to train them to operate this new piece of equipment. But that may not always be the case, but here it worked out for everybody. Some of the other investment we're seeing companies make isn't necessarily as expensive, but the technology, some of it's becoming a lot cheaper and much more accessible. I was at a outdoor distribution facility for a large customer of ours last week. It's a 65-acre piece of property. They used to use walkie-talkies to try and communicate with each other around the property. They assembled and installed a Wi-Fi based communication system that's completely solar powered and functions off of average typical cell phones. I think they spent less than $50,000 on this system, but it's changed their operations dramatically. They used to lose people because they were dead spots. They couldn't find them for an hour on the facility. So it was definitely a dramatic change. The tax benefits are terrific, and what I always try to remind clients is that just because you can get a deduction for it doesn't mean you should spend the money on it. There's got to be a business purpose for the investment. So we look at that first, and then if it works into the tax planning, it's terrific. So that's the approach that we take with that.
jumping over to you, Rob, and since something that's near and dear to my heart, as you well know, is what you and I have talked about probably 50 times, but I speak about the skills gap issue every single day of my life, it seems. And because there is no pipeline into our industry, we let it dry up. So, we have an aging workforce. I think in New Jersey, the average manufacturing employee is over 50. So we have some things to take care of. Now, some of the stuff that you do, a lot of the stuff you do, is to train people up. And how do you approach that as a company, but also as, to be honest with you, a provider into the pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely one of the more difficult areas of business for a lot of our customers is the lack of skilled workforce for their companies. We see that as well ourselves. I mean, we're hiring and looking for that same talent. In fact, we're looking for two CNC programmers right now. One for up in Massachusetts, one here in New Jersey. So, we struggle with the exact same things our customers do. And, I probably get a call at least once a week from one of our customers saying, hey, we can't seem to find anybody to, program our machines or, set up equipment or whatever. And, I just probably about a month or two ago, I got a call from a long-term customer who, unfortunately, their mold designer has taken ill, and they need to replace this person, and they're just absolutely struggling. And this is, if you're a tool and die shop, you need to have these molds designed in order to get work out on the shop floor and satisfy the customer. And they don't know where to turn, and it's a really difficult situation. And because there's such a shortage of talent out there, unfortunately, the problem is also being exacerbated by the company owners themselves, and they're kind of taking the attitude, well, if I hire somebody and I train somebody, they're just going to go to work somewhere else, and that's an awful thing to motto to live by in business. What you really want to do is you want to train them, and they're going to become more valuable, and you got to pay them more to keep them. Right? Who wants to hire a bunch of untrained people and keep them at that level? And that's what we're seeing out there. So, we're trying to create a lot of options for our customers to train their people as efficiently as possible. Our focus is more on the CNC programming side because of the software we represent. Fortunately, the problem doesn't exist as much on the additive manufacturing or the 3D printing side because that's a fairly quick ramp up compared to the traditional subtractive or CNC programming side of the equation. I looked to try and work with, some of the county schools to see if we could dovetail into their programs that they have, but I quickly got frustrated. And one of the challenges there is that every county school wants to reinvent their own wheel, right? And there's no standardization out there within the community college structure. In my head, in my vision, what I'd love to do is dovetail with them where they create a program to bring somebody through there. And I hate to say this, but their advanced manufacturing curriculum, which to me is a very basic curriculum. And then what we would do is we'd work a program to take, the cream of the crop from them and then build them up to another level. Because a lot of our customers are hiring out of these programs, companies from the county college system, and they're finding that they're not getting the knowledge and skill set and expertise that they really need with these students coming out of these programs. So there really needs to be, I hate to say it, but a a skills gap training that maybe we could fill in that role to help bring them up to a higher level. Because we run training classes all the time, and it's not a big deal to us just to stick a bunch of students into a pre-existing class. It doesn't really cost us anything to do that. So, but the frustration is there's no standardization out there, and unfortunately everybody kind of looks at it from their own perspective. So,
Quite true. We work a lot with the VOTEX, with CTE schools now, and county colleges, and there isn't, but we're working on it, and we are making some gains, to create a pathway. Interesting, I was just down in Atlanta for NIST MEP Summit, and one of the things they said was that there was several reports federally that say that somebody that comes on as an apprentice is more likely to stay with your company long term because you've shown loyalty to them and they show loyalty back. So I get it, because I feel like I train most of the technical salespeople throughout New Jersey, from NJMEP.
Right.
Right, George? You took off. I just had your car towed, so. This is New Jersey. But it is an issue for everybody. Jumping back to Robert down at this end, one of the other big things, and I had it as well, is succession planning, exit planning, whatever you want to call it. Companies are very weak at that, but I know you guys get involved a lot with that in the various forms. How do you work with a company, especially, a family-owned company that the matriarch or patriarch struggles to walk away?
I think this is one of those things that we try to talk about with clients regularly. Sometimes it's a little uncomfortable for them, and they see it as, occasionally they'll see it as a loss for us if they'll be worried that, we're going to lose the opportunity to do work for the business, so they're a little uncomfortable speaking to us about it. But we need to take that out of the equation because it's a very important thing for most closely held businesses. Usually the family's biggest asset is the business itself, and you can't just decide tomorrow that I want to retire and I'm going in 6 months I'm going to leave, because it's not going to end well. Maybe we can make it happen, and maybe you'll get lucky. I don't think it's the kind of thing that you want to get lucky with, though. You need to plan for this. Like I said, we try to have open dialogue with clients on this on a regular basis. We want to understand what their goals are. Is there a next generation coming into the business? Are they interested in working in the business? And I'll be honest with you, earlier in my career, that was pretty much generally what happened, is there was always somebody coming up that wanted to take over the business. We're not seeing that so much these days. There's more of an interest in selling the company and doing something different than there used to be. So you have to understand what everybody's intentions are. The older generation may want to transfer it, but the younger generation may not want it. Apart from the generational transfer, which has actually been made a lot easier because of the tax law changes, they've increased the exemption for gifting and the estate exemption to $11.4 million, which is temporary, but it does make transferring many businesses that we work with a lot easier. In addition to that kind of a transition, we're seeing a lot of businesses be sold now. It's very fast-paced. We lose a number of clients every year because they get sold. Our best clients are somebody's best acquisition target, so that's just a fact of life. But when you have a sale to an outside party, and from what everybody talks in the marketplace, it sounds like the PE firms are very active. We're seeing a lot of strategic buyers come in our practice itself. It's just anecdotal, but it's important, if that's the route that somebody's going to go, that you need to plan for that. You need to have a good management team in place. You need to look at the things that are going to add value to your business, and make sure that you're working on developing those items. That's something that somebody's going to pay for. If it's just if all you're doing is you have one person who's controlling and running everything and there's really no organization under them, that hurts the value of a business. So those are the kinds of things that we work with people on. Additionally, when you get up to the point where you're ready to put the company out there, you need to make sure that you're presenting it in the best light. And you should be contacting whoever your provider is, your accountant, your attorney, and make sure that you're addressing the issues and presenting the information in the strongest possible way, and accounting for all the things that the buyer is going to want to know about and that you should get credit for. There's a lot of add backs that have to be taken into account, and it gets pretty complicated sometimes. But the worst thing you can do is just hand off information without having a conversation with whoever your provider is. We're also seeing a lot of foreign companies come in. There's been a lot of interest. We had 4 clients sell last year that were sold to foreign businesses. I think that has to do with the strength of our economy here in the United States, as well as some of the tax rate changes, specifically the C Corp rate change. It's certainly more beneficial for them than it used to be. The last thing I'll mention on succession is we're seeing a lot or a renewed interest in ESOPs. Is everybody familiar with an ESOP? The Employee Stock Ownership Plan. It's basically a qualified plan that invests only in the operating or sponsoring company. We did a number of these years ago. It seemed to be a little quiet for a while. The last couple of years, we're having a lot of conversations about it. And it's a great vehicle if there's not a ready market for a company, or if the owners really want to help their employee group or leave something behind for the management team or transition it to the management team. It's got to be the right situation for it to work. But we have a number of them that are active that we're handling, and there's been certainly a renewed interest in that type of a transition recently.
Yeah, we've seen a lot more of the ESOPs as well through some of the companies we're working with. Part of what we're hearing, and you can tell me whether I'm right or wrong, is that they're finding that a lot of the investor groups that are buying companies, and they're investing in that company. They're not buying a company to grow its success. They want to grow its value and sell it. But they're finding that if you don't know the type of manufacturing, you're probably going to fail.
Right.
Are you hearing or seeing some of the same things? Is that any push towards ESOPs or others?
Well, I think when you have a financial buyer, the risk is always that what their motivation really is. And unfortunately, we've seen plenty of situations where somebody comes in and does a lot of damage to the business, trying to squeeze profit out of it, not really understanding the operation, and it hurts the organization. I think a lot of the ESOPs that we see, that there's, like I said earlier, there's an issue potentially with the marketability of the company for whatever reason. And you do talk to a lot of business owners that really care about the people that have worked for them over the years and want to see the business continue in its existing and form. That's important to some people. So there's an emotional piece to it that I think we see also.
I agree with that. I wouldn't sell my engineering company until somebody promised that they would keep my staff together for at least a year. And that was a heavy lift, and I didn't get the best deal that I was offered.
Right.
But those are the people that made my business succeed. So I get it. Okay. Eric, my follow-up was talking about risk, because you and I talk a lot about risk, and talking about risk in the whole business and contracts and, a variety of other things, including employees.
Yep.
Fill in some
Absolutely. I wanted
blanks.
to just follow up on an important word that Rob mentioned, and it's the word plan. Everybody who owns a manufacturing company is somehow involved in its management, plans for everything, inventory. You have a strategy for collecting the money that is owed to you, hiring, shipping out, supply chain, all those topics that you discuss and spend a lot of time, invest a lot of time in order to grow revenue. But you also need to plan for the risk, those adverse events that oftentimes you don't see coming. And many times clients of mine and others just don't want to spend the time, and I hear it time and time again, whether it's in my own household or at a cocktail party or on a soccer field. Nobody likes lawyers, right? But, we are that kind of necessary evil in many ways. And there are ways that you can protect yourself from those adverse events. and prevent the risk from being sued or having an issue come up. And the two ones that always come to mind for me are one, employment agreements, and two, contracts. So briefly with employment agreements, I mean, not every person in your company should have an employment agreement. But there are those key personnel who have, if you want to call it, the keys to the kingdom. They know what your confidential information is, your trade secrets. They have access to your employees' personal information, your key business information, your financial records. Those people, you should seriously consider having an employment agreement with them. Because that agreement, that piece of paper outlines how much they're going to get paid, what their duties are, under what circumstances that you can terminate them, and a code of conduct that they have to abide by. Just as important, if they're going to leave and go somewhere else to a competitor, under certain circumstances, you can limit that or prevent that under what we call a non-compete or restriction on their ability to work. Those are enforceable under certain circumstances in New Jersey. And what's important is, I mean, you've worked long and hard to develop confidential business information, your proprietary trade secrets. You need to protect that. You can include that in those employment agreements, that everything that they're doing is your information, and that they can't go and use it somewhere else. That gives you the opportunity to sue them, if they do breach that provision. Oftentimes you see, lawsuits that come up and they get stuck in court, and arbitration is an excellent way for businesses to control costs and to control how those disputes are resolved. And you can build those agreements or provisions into your employment contracts. The other side of it, so that's the inward-facing agreement, if you will. The other is the outward-facing, is the contracts that you have with all the people, all the businesses that you come in contact with on a day-to-day basis. Your vendors, your suppliers, your customers. When was the last time you reviewed them? When I was the outside general counsel for a major construction company, we were in 11 states. We reviewed the customer contract every year. Did we review the vendor agreement every year? We didn't. That was with the ops. It was just we assumed our business partners would treat us fairly. You can't assume that. You want to argue and negotiate for the best terms possible. You want to make sure that if you're relying on a supplier or a vendor heavily, that they're insured. Get copies of their insurance agreements or their declaration pages. Protect yourself through indemnification agreements. That if there's an issue with something that you're buying from somebody that goes into your product and that fails, that they're responsible for it. That they have to defend you if a lawsuit is filed, and if you have to pay out any kind of damages, that they would be the one responsible to pay for those damages, including your attorney's fees. These are issues that come up every day, but they can be managed by taking a step back and making risk management part of your weekly business meetings, as if you're talking about AR or accounts payable or your holiday party planning. Make risk management a part of your business, and these issues, if they do come up, will be managed a lot easier than you might think.
Okay, back to you, Rob. I want to talk a little bit about some misconceptions and some realities with automation. First of all, we think that all of these capabilities just happened in the last few years. If you go back and look up a beautiful actress named Hedy Lamarr, you will find out that she had an incredible brain that actually all of our cell phones and our GPSs have technology that she thought of in the 40s. Same thing with CNC. CNC is computer numeric control machines. They've evolved from the tape that we were talking to now the 5-axis. You deal with a lot of this stuff. You deal with 3D printing and how that's come, and it just doesn't plug and play, and it doesn't become the number one production thing. It has to evolve. What are you seeing in the industry and the companies you're working with automation? What's it leading to?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our customers have to compete on a global scale. And, fortunately or unfortunately, we're going to be seeing significant wage increases, especially at the bottom tier, due to new legislation that's going to take effect over the next couple
Several
of
years,
years. I was at the manufacturing day last year talking to one of my customers who was an exhibitor, and they do all the manufacturing, all the molding, all the assembly here in New Jersey, and it was kind of a hot topic, even back then, as far as what's going to happen with this salary increase. And he said he's not going to be able to survive competing out there, having to pay people $15 an hour. It's just cannot happen, will not happen, and they will have to choose to, outsource the assembly and some of the manufacturing steps overseas in order to compete. So those are going to be jobs that are lost to the New Jersey sector. There's definitely a lot of automation that's going to be occurring into the future. You've got AI, machine learning, and it is going to have a significant effect. And it's a necessary effect if our manufacturers here in New Jersey are going to compete. One of the things I like to look back at is, agriculture. If you go back into the early to mid 1800s, 70% of the workforce was employed in agriculture. Okay, did anybody care to guess what it is today? It's less than 3%. Okay, doesn't mean we all stopped eating, right? Unfortunately, you can tell. And we're also feeding a good chunk of the world as well, where that wasn't necessarily the case back in the 1800s. So, we're producing more with less, human factor. And that was through automation. And that occurred over a fairly long period of time. So we're absolutely going to see that same net effect, over the next 10, 20, 30 years. You got self-driving cars, which everybody thinks is going to be a couple years away. I personally think it's a good 10 years away before that's a reality on a significant scale. But you have a lot of the manufacturing processes being automated. I was reading an article about a restaurant in Boston that's fully automated. Right? You just go in there, you go up to the kiosk, you order your food, and there's a whole assembly line that just produces the food. They have one person there, I guess, to keep the machines clean and to put the garnish on top of the end product. But that's really what's happening, and it's a necessary evil. There's been I think a lot of people blame overseas global competition for the decline in the manufacturing jobs, but I think also a big part of that has been the automation, and that's something that is going to continue to happen. The good news about this is that there are going to be a lot of real high-end, high-tech jobs in the manufacturing sector, and that's what we really need to train the workforce for. So, yeah.
Yeah, very important points you made. The minimum wage, it's one thing, and we always want to blame China, et cetera. I'm more worried about Pennsylvania because their minimum wage is 8.25. So if you're manufacturing and you're competing, that's who you're competing with. So, and there has been an evolution. We were forced to, as manufacturers, to automate. So it's been very important to us because it increases productivity with less people. But these are things that, we need to pay attention to because, believe it or not, we've never dropped below third in the world in manufacturing. Through all this dead talk. And we're now number 2, projected to take over to the number 1 spot from China again next year. Believe me, I wouldn't lie to you. I'm not good at lying. But so where's our mentality with some of these things? So now let me switch gears a little bit because there's something that drives everybody crazy. I was reading an article last week in Atlanta that said that in 5 years, in a given day, we will interact with some sort of computer or sensor or something 30,000 times a day. Now, that seemed phenomenally high to me, but even if it's 3,000 times a day, now I'm sitting there and everything I do, I look at something. And I just use the little boy's room and I'm looking at the sensor that's going to flush the toilet after me. And I'm saying, you know, maybe they were right. So what's that going to do? Cybersecurity is a huge risk for all of us and all of your companies and what you do. So jumping back to you, Robert, are you guys looking at that as an issue or a solution right now?
This cybersecurity?
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's been very active, unfortunately, and every year we see clients get hit with a problem that file servers get locked up. There's issues at the company. Their email was hacked. We just had one recently where their email server was hacked. The passwords were found out. There were logins happening from parts of Europe, Eastern Europe, and Africa, and they sent an email out to the staff that appeared to really was coming from the owner's email account, and instructed them to make a vendor payment, and they ended up just giving out $100,000 incorrectly because the servers, the systems were not protected the way they should be. The more we rely on the technology, the more we open ourselves up to these things, and we're seeing it more and more. I gave you the example earlier about the Wi-Fi communication system. I was at an event, so I didn't get to pull the IT person aside, but the next conversation I have as soon as I get back to the office is going to be with him to make sure that everything's been properly addressed. Now, they're a high-quality operation. I'm going to assume that they did, but it's something that we want to make sure is in place and being addressed properly. One of the biggest things that we see in the middle market companies that we work with is the employee group is not necessarily as aware of these risks as the owners tend to be, or the higher level executives. We hear about these things. We travel in circles, and as professionals, we interact with other professionals who have had clients that have had issues, and we're aware of what the latest trends are. And my IT team at the firm emails our staff and lets them know about the newest development or what's trending so that we can watch out for it. But every time I see a problem, it's a lower level clerical type employee that innocently clicks the link on the email or follows the instructions about the vendor's bank account changed and the new wire needs to go to some other bank account, and innocently enough only trying to do their job, but they're not really educated as to what's happening in the marketplace. And that's one of the biggest things that we do. We'll do the assessments and we'll help them with the technical side of it, but educating the employee group at the businesses is one of the simplest ways and most cost-effective ways to protect yourself from the cyber issues.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that some realism. A customer of ours on Monday had somebody previously over in Europe, and I think it got carried in a USB drive and brought back to the company, and ransomware hit the company, and they're still shut down now a week later. So it happens on a regular basis, and like you said, the weak link always is the person bringing that USB drive into the company or clicking on a link. So it's a serious issue.
Yeah, we address it. We have a subsidiary that is devoted or dedicated to providing counseling and cybersecurity, vigilance training, and for smaller companies that the rapid response if issues come up. We have a former retired Secret Service agent who helps us that. But our IT group is very aggressive, and we have training, and they send out these dummy emails and the like. They sent out one to all the attorneys that we had been hit with an ethics investigation. I mean, second to getting sued for malpractice, ethics investigation is, your stomach turns. I'm an ethics investigator, and I knew it was a dummy email because we don't send out things via an email. My stomach turned. You get attorneys running into the hall, flipping out, and
I'd pay to see that.
yeah. And some of them hit it, right? Some of them replied to this email. But we had one of my partners who answered one of those emails years ago that they got from some country or town in Africa. And I had a case. My buddy, good friend of mine, sent me a referral, a purchase and sale agreement of a piece of equipment. And the letter we received from the client was a little funny. Excuse me, but we got the check that was supposed to then go to him. It was on a Bank of America check, but the way it was written out was not pay to the order. It was like pay for the order, and the numbers were all. So my staff was great. We picked it up. It was definitely a scam. We called the company that was allegedly selling the equipment. Said, "Oh yeah, we get calls like this from law firms twice a month." So I called my friend back. He said, "Oh, I don't know. Somebody emailed me off the internet." So I figured it was legitimate. I said, "Dude, what are you doing?" Right? So we need to be careful out there. And if you've got the time and the money to you can have just a vendor come in and just over a lunch and learn, explain what's out there. You may not have the size company that our firm has that can invest the money for the training. Every couple of months, we've got to go through the training over and over again. But it can be catastrophic. We had one client they were paying a company to back up their tapes, and they kept paying them, and then the company would hire somebody else to do the actual physical backup. They stopped paying that third company, so the third company just stopped backing up the tapes. When the attack occurred and they went to get their backup tapes, they weren't there for like a 3-month period. They had to pay, the Bitcoin to get the data back, and then the company, they found out, really had no money left, so they had no avenue to sue them. So there are multiple tentacles to the cyber issue that you need to be up on.
To add to that a little bit, going back to the automation thing, one of the things that's happening in industry is you think about the automobile racing industry is, everything has sensors on it, going back to your sensor comment, and that is fed real time back to the analysts at the racetrack, and they're really analyzing and adjusting things real time. That technology is making its way into the manufacturing companies where the CNC machines, everything's really kind of, has built-in sensors and real time is communicating. And the more connectivity you have, the more exposure you have to, cybersecurity issues and attacks. So that's one reason why I don't like to have any of those video cameras and stuff at home. So I'm trying to keep myself off the grid as much as possible.
And Eric, I'm still waiting for that check.
It's a big piece of equipment. It's making its way up from Georgia.
Manufacturing, as more things become online, it becomes an issue. The DoD is now requiring every vendor in their supply chains to be compliant. And they tried to make it last December 31st, and it didn't work. But they're pushing very hard, and we know companies that are getting letters saying that their contracts will be ended. Some companies, that's 100% of their business. Hearing about it, believe it or not, in food and fragrances. I laughed when I first heard of it, but then my wife said, "Do you know what the formula for Chanel No. 5?" And it's like, whoa, it doesn't dawn on you. So things are happening, and I agree with you, Robert, that a lot of it, but it's not just it's all of us, because how many people have Alexis and Siri and all these other things, and we've heard from companies that they're taking all the information, and we're okay with it because it's never going to affect me until it does. Mm-hmm. I have a friend who owns a business, and his entire accounts were drained because he didn't pay attention. So it's very interesting how this evolved. We're finishing up here with with our panel, so I want to go a little off script and put you guys on. I want to ask you one thing. I love New Jersey, been here all my life. All right, I've had 2 businesses here. If you look at any chart, when they say business friendly, we're 49th or 50th consistently. But I love the place because there's a lot of great things about being in New Jersey, including public education, home value, our per capita income. There's a lot of great things about being here, the shore, the mountains, etc. If you could tell, like the legislative caucus that I've worked so hard to get for manufacturing, if you could tell them one thing to help change business in New Jersey, what would it be? One thing. Eric?
They've got to take a step back and make some of the legislation a little less consumer friendly. And I've been representing companies for years, and the pro-consumer nature of some of the legislation leads to frivolous lawsuits that we spend even $5,000 to $10,000 to get resolved, which is just a waste of time and money. So there needs to be a stronger voice that carve back consumer fraud statute and all of its siblings, as I like to call it. That's what I would say.
Rob?
Cost of doing business, which ties to certainly a lot of areas, and I don't know how we're going to get out of the unfunded liability issue we have in the state, and what that's going to add to costs on an ongoing basis. So very, very much concerned about the existing cost structure and where it's headed.
I think in general, they need to understand that the businesses that exist in a community really are usually the biggest employer group. And if there's a business-friendly tone in the community, it makes it easier for the businesses to operate, more cost-effective, less regulation, less issues. But to me, the way I always look at our client base is if there's 100 employees at the company or 50 employees, there's 50 families that exist and take care of their children and put their kids through school because that business exists in the community. You can't lose sight of that, and it's important that decisions are made that, yeah, there's reasons for things. And 100 years ago, there were no
Right.
employment laws, and there were reasons that those things had to change. But some of those conditions don't exist anymore. But some of the requirements are still there, and they're not necessary, maybe,
Okay. I'd like to do a round of applause for the panel. And we're going to do some Q&A, but I will caution you, and they gave me a paintball gun. A lot of times when we do Q&A, somebody gives a commercial for them or their company or whatever. That's wonderful. Get on a panel. You got a question for the gang? That's what I'd like to hear, because you don't always get 3 such experts together.
Hello. Is this on?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah,
Okay.
better.
Hi. Should I say where I'm from? It's not a commercial.
You can do whatever you wish. But I got the paintball gun.
Yeah, or this thing, you can turn it off. My name's Tamara Vaughn. I'm from Bergen Community College. I'm the manager of business development and continuing ed. And so Rob, in the middle, Rob, I know when you mentioned earlier about, how community colleges, I agree with you. It's like everybody's in a silo. And I work on the continuing ed side, and we have manufacturing programs and welding programs, et cetera. But it's interesting because we have trouble communicating with the credit side of the manufacturing. So there's sometimes a little jealousy, and people are worried about their full-time tenured faculty positions. Sometimes continuing ed threatens them because we work with instructors. So it's different. And the other issue that I'm seeing, that I'm faced with a lot, is we were talking earlier about how, this gentleman and I were talking also about how high schools in New Jersey are just college. No, they never bring up the trades, ever. And I had 20 years experience in traditional undergrad before, so I'm trying to get into the high schools with the programs. And so anyway, I thought it was interesting that, so you have the state that's telling you, send your kids to college, but then I'm sitting here and everywhere I go, because I'm only 6 months in this job, is that they're saying, we don't have workers. We don't have workers. So it is political, really. I mean, it is, because it's the state, it trickles down, telling the high schools, make sure your kids go to college because we're going to look good if our state has the most college graduates. So I don't know, you guys are all really smart and you have so much experience. Do you have any advice for how we
Yeah,
can
I mean,
kind of get around this?
the college debt is 1.6, what is it, 1.6
It's 37,000 per person.
trillion dollars. I mean, that's more than credit card debt now. I think we've kind of lost sight of, where the rubber meets the road in education. And, I have 3 kids pseudo in college right now. It's a long story, but the one in the middle absolutely hates college. He's like, this is just like high school at a different level. He's like, I want to be doing what I want to be doing and follow his passion, which is, computer science and web development. And, he feels like 90% of what he's being taught doesn't apply. So he's taken a sabbatical from that and doing self-training. There's a lot of technology out there. If you want to learn web development from the best web development teacher in the world, you don't necessarily have to go to college for that. You can go to YouTube or Khan Academy or forget what the other site is. But unfortunately, the schools, like a lot of other places, things are driven by egos. Every professor thinks their curriculum's the best. Everybody thinks they're the best at presenting the material. But if we can put those egos aside and really streamline education, I think would make vast improvements.
Because no one's really doing what's right for the student. And that's the thing that's the frustration I'm seeing for these high school students and a lot of older students that come in and want to do a trade program. So where do we start? I mean, politicians aren't really talking about that even when they're running.
Right.
There's a lot more conversation about apprenticeships and stuff, and the state's actually stepped up. And we don't have enough time for me to wax about this because this eats me very much because you're right. We're not doing what's best for the kid. Wall Street Journal article, 60% of us don't graduate from college. 60% of us. So 60% of us have to have other jobs. It's about providing a pathway for kids. But we've got to talk. We've got great county colleges, but we don't work together. And that is part of the issue that we have. We don't have these conversations. Everybody talks about the German model. German model won't work in the United States. You know why? Because when you're about 15 or 16, you take tests and you're told to go one way or the other. Now, they don't see the trades as a negative. We do. I don't know. I have friends who started as auto mechanics, and I live in the same town I grew up in, and they can buy and sell us. So I have 4 college degrees, and I'm proud of my degrees, but there are times when I look and say that. So there's a lot of conversation to be had. Well, I started in an electrical apprenticeship program to help pay for college.
Well, that's interesting. It's the last thing I'll say about it. One of the ways I'm trying to sell programs in the high schools is the number one reason I know the reason students are dropping out of college, not the number one of the top is cost. Even if they're getting full Pell and full tag, there's still costs they can't afford. So, hey, maybe if you go and you work for a manufacturing company, or you do maybe like a certified production technician and you go work for UPS, there's going to be money to help you pay for college. That's how I'm trying to spin it to the principals, saying there's a benefit here. They don't have to do this forever, but maybe they will. So it's another option.
There is definitely
Trickle up? Is that the answer? Instead of trying to trickle down from leadership? I'm not sure.
I mean, there is definitely a transition going on, I think, for the better. As unfortunate as the $1.6 trillion of student loan debt is, I think it's getting people to rethink, the strategy. Unfortunately, if that magically all goes away, as some people are talking about. I think it's only going to exacerbate the problem. But there are a lot of companies, big companies, even like Google, that are starting to hire people with skills rather than degrees. So we are starting to see a big shift, and I think that's going to have a profound impact on education in the future. So
I think one of the things that you'll eventually see too, in the accounting profession, we're expecting a wave of change. Accounting was always one of those degrees that you went to school and you were pretty much guaranteed a job when you finished. It may not be like that. We're looking at artificial intelligence, technology that's going to replace and automate some of the work that was done by our entry-level staff. So there was what was once a great white-collar job that may not exist anymore. It will be much more limited than it used to be. These are financial decisions that, you're going to invest in a college degree. Is the payback going to be there? Eventually, the payback won't be there. And some of these other paths are going to be much better opportunities for children. I have 5 kids. Several of them are college age, and 2 are in high school. Yeah. So I'm looking at.
Seems very calm.
Yeah. It's because I'm here, not at home. But thank you.
It's called 5.
But I'm looking at this decision differently with my younger children than I did with my first couple. And it's because of these changes. We have to be aware of it. It may not be the right path anymore.
We're not at 18.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many of you doing exactly what you decided to do at 18? Show of hands. Let me see. 1.
How many are using
What are you
their
doing?
degree for what they went to school for?
You're a reporter. Talk to David. That's not a career.
I didn't know. I was a reporter until 22, so I guess I developed late, but I'm here now. So that counts, I hope.
I wanted to be born wealthy. Great parents, they screwed up. We could stay on that one, I think. Any other questions for the panel?
Oh, yeah, I'll get in trouble.
Thanks.
Okay.
Calvin Novato with UMB Capital Finance. My question for each of the panelists really is, what do you each see as the biggest challenge coming up for New Jersey manufacturers in 2020?
I have to be quiet.
Yeah, I'll go first. Like what I touched on, with the Murphy administration, the legislation on the employment side, I think is the biggest day-to-day adjustment, especially for the less sophisticated manufacturer. And by less sophisticated, that has nothing to do with size at all. You could have a 10-person, that's probably a bad example, let's say a 35-person employee manufacturer that meets the definition of the new family leave, that is fully on board, has all the ducks in a row, whatever euphemism you want to use. You could have a 500 employee and management just doesn't have their stuff together and they struggle. I represent a company that's publicly traded where they're a manufacturer, national. We manage their litigation. Some of their litigation management until recently was very behind the times, because who was managing it, and they did not have litigators in that role. So you need the people who are good at what they do, in those specific roles. But I think that's the day-to-day. Litigation is always going to be there, and it goes up and it goes down depending on who's in office and what laws get passed. But I think it's the employment laws that really pose the biggest day-to-day issue.
Kind of repeat what I said earlier, but the increased costs and the costs of the new laws being put into place and the new minimum wage increasing and everything's adding to costs. And specifically for 2020, we've been in the longest expansion in the history of the U.S. and unfortunately, a slowdown is imminent, I think, and unfortunately it's being forecasted, so it may come to terms just because people are talking about it. And certainly there is a manufacturing slowdown over in Europe and it's only a matter of time before that hits us. So we have all these costs increasing, but at the same time, there's probably going to be some sort of slowdown next year. So it's kind of a perfect storm for the customer base.
My concern is companies' ability and willingness to make change. The marketplace is changing dramatically. Technology, artificial intelligence, additional pressures from other countries. If they're not on top of what's happening around them and they're not willing to or able to change the way they function, I think it's not going to be good for them afterwards. We've seen it so many times over the years, and I could tell you different stories, but that willingness to change is so critical to a company surviving and being successful in the future.
I might add something to that is that, and I agree with what they're saying, but John, you and I have been in manufacturing. One of the problems is that if you don't have highly trained, good people coming in, you can't worry about change. You got to be worried about making payroll and getting production out the door. So that is the critical aspect to me. By our estimates, and we work with all of the companies in New Jersey, there's 33,000 open manufacturing jobs at various levels. From engineers, we're not producing enough engineers in this country, to, high-level technicians, high-level machinists, lathe operators, right, John? Anybody know a lathe operator? Talk to John. He needs two. So that is the biggest thing that they have to overcome in 2019, 2020, 2021. In New Jersey, there's about 4 million nationally. It isn't just a New Jersey problem. You can't find people, we're not producing them.
Even in Germany, like you talking about Germany is struggling right now with people who want to work with their hands and whatnot. Even though they're going into it, people going into it don't want to be going into it. It's a work ethic thing, like we have. Our younger people. The whole world is in the same situation, and that's what makes it worse. We have no role model anymore. We are the role model.
And you want to re-educate, to ask where we have to start with ourselves. Because it's okay for all of you to have your kids go into trades or things like that, but my kids got to go to college, right? That's the way we think. It's not the mentality that they have in Europe, and it shouldn't be ours either.
The problem here is the guidance counselors they're pressured, and that's how they get measured, and that's how they get their raises, on how many kids go to college and how many kids go to Princeton and Harvard and whatnot. That's got to stop.
Nobody admits it, but I'm convinced there's some type of federal or state funding that trickles down to the high school and gets them
There is.
college. But nobody
It's not
admits
hidden.
it. And I'm-
It's not hidden. And I'll tell you something else. You're working for Bergen, which is a great community college. They don't get credit for sending kids to two-year schools.
Right. Well, we're competing now because Montclair, they don't require the SAT, so that's looking at bringing our credit side. So students, guidance counselors, well, don't go to Bergen, go to Montclair because it's a four-year school, with your SATs. So you can have a 2.4, 2.3, 2.1, they might just go there. It doesn't mean they don't end up at Bergen.
So a couple of years ago, I was at a Boy Scout career event, and there were maybe about 35 Boy Scouts at this particular event, and I was going to speak about 3D printing because they thought that was going to be an interesting topic, and I jokingly said to my wife, I said, I'm probably going to go there and there's going to be some sort of brain surgeon that goes before me. Lo and behold, the person right before me brings this jar and there's a brain in it. But that's not the point of my discussion here. My point is I got up there and I always like to know the audience and everything like that. And I looked around at the 35 kids and I said, how many of you like to make things? And it was very depressing because only 2 hands went up. Okay, that was absolutely a shock to me. Okay, so they'd love to make a computer game, a virtual world, right? But we're not quite all there where we're hooked up to the matrix and living in a virtual world. You know, we interact with things that need to be produced every day, every minute of our lives. So, you know, I would say that there's a problem at the educational level, but there's also something happening much earlier that's, you know, the kids do not have interest in making things.
David?
Well, to follow up on all of these points, so I'm wondering, have you professional manufacturers and professionals in other capacities, have you ever approached any of the high schools to say, with respect to getting these 18-year-old high school graduates into manufacturing in New Jersey, the first sentence could be the average employee who works in the manufacturing sector in New Jersey earns about $90,300 per year. Get their attention that way, and then give all the points thereafter, rather than saying here's what it entails, and at the end remind them, and it also pays $90,300 a year. Whereas if you earn a bachelor's degree, I don't have the figure, but I imagine the starting salary, if you're 22, 23, 24, with the bachelor's degree in New Jersey is probably less than half.
The starting salary.
Right.
You're going to kill John Logue.
Okay, I'm sorry, not starting, but mean average once you're in your 40s and 50s, but still, that's something to look forward to. Basically, why, I know we've already asked this, but I can't understand why are these high schools not saying we need to point our young people to manufacturing, because as you said at the beginning, John, there are almost 400,000 New Jersey residents working in manufacturing, and you have these 33,000 open positions in New Jersey. Are those the correct figures?
Approximately, yeah.
So I just can't get my mind around it.
It goes back to a lot of things that we talked about, is that we don't look at it as a viable option. We as parents, we as kids, as Rob just said, kids, we give them a lot of Lego stuff, but they don't play in that, everything they get is bought for them because we don't have those. There's no shop classes in schools anymore. My high school, third generation, my son, the shop class is now a music room. I love music, but there's no shop. There's no design. There's no reality base because most of us are going to be out in the world doing the other things. So I think it's a huge issue, but somewhere along the line, and is it the manufacturer's job to go around to these high schools? I don't think so. We need kids that are coming out, and I don't want to speak for you, John, but, I hear from a lot of manufacturers that the problem is that kids coming out of good high schools in a great public education state like New Jersey can't do basic math and English. 77%, I heard, go to county colleges need remedial. And we're number 2 in the country in public education. Holy crap. What's Mississippi doing? And I'm not knocking Mississippi because they're smart kids, but this is a problem because we're telling kids you're not going to need math and English. You're not going to work. Yeah, but they're lawyers. Let's not over it.
I edit all my kids' paper. The professional writer. I like to think they don't teach them how to write.
No.
In high school at all.
My question is for John. You said, and you, not one of the other.
I'm not on a panel. I don't have.
I know, but not one of the other 12 ones in your class when you were younger. You said you were one of 12. I wanted to know. You said that the U.S. is number 2 in manufacturing in the world. What's our most commonly manufactured product, and what's going to put us ahead of China, which you said is upcoming?
Well, you can't. It's hard to put what's our most, because everything you see, touch, or use every day, everything you eat, every pill you take is manufactured by somebody. So that's a hard thing. In New Jersey, we're a supply chain state. So we have electronics, rubber, metals. There's so many things that we do. But what puts us ahead of the Chinas and the rest of the world is that we've been leading the way in advanced techniques like 3D and CNC and so on. These lead to us. I don't care who makes the little plastic tchotchkes that we buy at Yankee Stadium. I do care about who makes my phone. I do care about who makes my car. I do care about who makes the parts for an airplane. And we're number one in the world in quality, and we've maintained that. I always had a college professor that talked about, when he talked about quality, he talked about the difference between 100% quality, which seems impossible, and 99%. How many planes would crash every day? You know, when you look at it that way, it changes your mentality. So I think that we're ahead in a lot of ways, but we won't be if we don't change our look at education and pathways into STEM. And you don't have to enter college at age 18. You might go to work for a company like John and develop your skills. And then if John believes in you, he'll probably invest in you to go to engineering school or something. You know, I was a dummy. I owned my own company, so I paid for all of my degrees. When I talk to kids, and I work a lot with Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, I tell them, find somebody to help pay for you. $37,000 average. $37,000. And that includes the kids that don't graduate with the degree. So you might have $37,000 worth of debt and no degree. So at the end of the day, it's all about, in my opinion, our workforce. That's what puts us ahead of everybody else. And, you know, we need to maintain that, and we need to grow it. And we're not, I don't think we're yet doing a good job of it. Sorry, I'm preaching. You know, come to Manufacturing Day, October 4th, you know, and you'll find you'll get to listen to more people preach. It's about the industry. Last statement, guys, so that we can get on our way and let these
Sure.
good people go.
I would say plan. I mean, I've talked about risk this morning. Sit down. Maybe it's a retreat weekend outside your office. Examine your business, your day-to-day operations. Where are your pressure points? If something went wrong on a Tuesday, how is that going to impact Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday? And try to develop a strategy around that, whether it's employment agreements, human resource agreements, and take a look at your contracts just to make sure that you're protected, because, as you were saying, it's not only you, but it's the families of the people that you're working for. And you can eliminate it or mitigate and or eliminate a lot of the risk that your company can face from a legal perspective, at least.
I would really say embrace change. The world's changing at an ever-brisk pace. Not only embrace change, but help drive change. It's a very complicated world. It's becoming more complicated. Make sure you're keeping yourself up to speed on the latest technologies and everything like that. I'll add a little bit of a shameless plug here. We do have an event in 3 weeks. It's called Expand 3D. Several hundred people will be there. Industry leaders from the additive world, the subtractive world, computer-aided design. So that's in our Branchburg facility across 3 days in the middle of the month. So if you're interested, I have a card on that. I can actually give you a free code to attend the event.
It's a great event for young people, too.
Yeah, if you have any, we're talking about the young students, if you have any of them that want to, attend the event. It's 3 days. The days are almost identical to each other. The difference between the 3 days is the keynote presenters that are going to be going on each of the 3 days. So you can check it out at our website. So appreciate everybody's time today.
Just, again, remind everybody to make sure that you understand what's happening in your marketplace around you and what the potential impacts to your businesses can be. And then make sure that you're working with the right people that can help you deal with those issues, whether it's your management team or your law firm or your technical professionals, to make sure that you have all the resources that you need to make the right decisions so that you can work and make your business stronger. And then I just want to thank everybody for allowing me to participate here today. Thank you.
Great panelists. And Jeff, I'd like you to wander back up.
Thank you, John, and thank you to Rob Grote, Rob Hassold, and Eric Probst. As always, we'll have full coverage of this discussion later today on NJBIZ.com. We'll have expanded coverage in our next print edition, and we'll post a video of the entire event on our YouTube channel in about a week or a week and a half. Thanks to Kane AV for handling the video production. If you want more information about Kane and what they can do, please stop by the registration desk. And if you can, please join us at our next discussion on crisis management, which is October 29th, so an appropriately scary topic just before Halloween. We'll make it less scary, don't worry. That's right back here at the Doubletree. I hope to see you there. Thanks for coming, everyone.